Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Betsy Shear, and as a board member and vice chair of the programming committee for JDCA, I'd like to welcome you to today's community conversation with special guest, Congressman Jamie Raskin. It's no secret that we find ourselves at a critical juncture in the battle for our democracy. The words slash, burn, gut, vengeance, and chaos are among our daily worries. And it's because we find ourselves in such a moment that we come together today to find strength in community, to seek options, and to take action together. And we thank you for choosing to take action with JDCA. Since his inauguration less than 3 weeks ago, we've seen what can only be described as a coup by Donald Trump and Elon Musk, as they have carried out a hostile takeover of whole arms of the US government in blatant violation of existing laws and our Constitution. Among them, an unelected and unconfirmed private citizen has acquired access to the federal checkbook, which oversees $6 trillion annually in payments to American households and businesses, affecting all of us in the form of tax returns and more. Musk has also shuttered the U.S. Agency for International Development, USAID, an independent agency created by Congress to provide emergency and disaster relief, healthcare, counterterror, and other vital assistance globally. They have forced out CIA and FBI agents, inspectors general for over 15 government agencies, tens of thousands of career civil servants, and anyone else who refuses to pledge fealty to Donald Trump. Now is the time for accountability, not the least of which is holding Republicans accountable for enabling these actions by Trump and Musk. Democrats are taking action in the courts, in the streets, and in Congress to oppose this unconstitutional government takeover. And we're here today determined to learn more about what we can and must do to defend our democracy. Congressman Raskin, we're counting on you to help us out here. We have the will. Do we have the power? Over 2,300 people signed up for this call today. Please don't let this conversation end without your personal action plan. And now to introduce our honorable guest speaker, I'm delighted to turn things over to my fellow JDCA board member and political committee co-chair, Michael Gelman. Michael?
Thank you, Betsy. In addition to being a board member of JDCA, I'm also a very, very proud constituent of our guest, Congressman Jamie Raskin. Congressman Raskin is a constitutional law professor currently representing Maryland's 8th District and serving as the leading Democrat on the House Judiciary Committee. He led Donald Trump's second impeachment trial after the January 6th attack on the Capitol, and subsequently received the JDCA's first ever Defender of Democracy Award. In the past week, Congressman Raskin has led the charge against Trump and President Musk's unconstitutional power grabs. That was done intentionally, by the way. Earlier this week, while speaking in front of the USAID headquarters to protest its shutdown, he declared, quote, "We don't have a fourth branch of government called Elon Musk," end of quote. Jamie, thank you for joining us. I look forward to hearing from you about what Congress and Democrats in Congress are doing and what role each of us can play in this fight. I'm now going to hand this over to the CEO of JDCA, Halie Soifer, who will lead today's discussion. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Michael. Thank you to Betsy. I, too, am a proud constituent of our speaker today, Congressman Raskin, and so grateful to you for joining thousands of us from around the country. Thank you. We'll just dive right in. We all want to hear from you. The first question, and I will encourage everyone to put your questions in the chat, and we'll try to get to as many as possible. The first nearly 3 weeks of Donald Trump's presidency have included a myriad of actions including the shuttering of USAID, which was previewed in Project 2025, and you had warned us about Project 2025 back in July. In fact, Project 2025 explicitly states that USAID should be used as a pilot test for a large-scale overhaul of the federal government. And knowing this, we know that other federal agencies and deep spending cuts are next. Though many of these actions are clearly right out of Project 2025, the speed at which it's been implemented has been surprising. So this is a two-part question. What has surprised you the most about the actions taken by the Trump administration in these first nearly 3 weeks? And second, as the foremost constitutional expert in Congress, how are these actions violating the Constitution?
Well, Haley, thank you so much. And Michael Gelman and Betsy and all my friends out there, thank you for coming together at this moment of national civic emergency. So thank you for your leadership. And Susie and Bobby, it's wonderful to be with you guys too. Look, what has surprised me? Well, first, it has not surprised me that they've tried to, or they're seeking to implement the horrific agenda embodied in Project 2025, as we spoke about it last year, despite the fact that Donald Trump went around the country disavowing it, saying he'd never read it, he didn't know anything about it, he wasn't in support of it. It doesn't surprise me they move forward. The shocking part is how much all of it has been embodied and personified in one guy, Elon Musk, and how he has been elevated and enthroned essentially to be something like a co-president or a would-be dictator for the future, which is quite certainly what he's got in his mind, and certainly what's in the mind of all of his Silicon Valley libertarian billionaire friends who believe that democracy's over and we're moving into an age of global corporate monarchy, essentially. So it is amazing to me how quickly that transformation has happened within the Republican Party. You know, how are Trump's actions violating the Constitution? How are they not violating the Constitution? The entire thing is an inversion and distortion and obliteration of the Constitution. Congress passes the laws. Congress establishes the federal programs. What is the job of the president under Article 2? The core job of the president under Article 2 is to take care that the laws are faithfully executed. The president implements the laws that we adopt. So if we pass a law, as Congress did most recently in 1998, establishing the Agency for International Development and appropriating billions of dollars for the purposes of trying to do HIV/AIDS prevention around the world and anti-malarial work around the world and uplifting water quality around the world and improving nutrition by buying food from farmers in Iowa and Arkansas and New Jersey and Delaware and Florida and sending it to people around the world to strengthen democracy and human rights, then that is what the president and those who work for the president must do. It's not up to them to say they disagree with that and they are going to evaporate the Agency for International Development and then harness the funds or impound the funds for other purposes, whether it's building the wall or doing whatever else they want with it. That's not how our system works. Congress, which is accountable to the people, has the power of the purse. So that's an essential constitutional understanding that through all of the civic illiteracy they're promoting, they're hoping to get away with. But we've got to remind people that's the proper relationship. And please don't use that horrid phrase, 3 co-equal branches. We are not co-equal branches. Congress comes in Article 1 for a reason. We represent the people. We pass all of the laws. Look at Articles 1 through 17, everything regulating commerce domestically, internationally, regulating piracy, the seat of government, you name it. We're the ones who pass the budget. We're the ones who control taxes. The president's job is to take care of the laws are faithfully executed 4 short sections in the Constitution on the president. And one of them is how you impeach a president who's engaged in treason, bribery, and other high crimes and misdemeanors. If we're co-equal, which is not even a word, that's like extremely unique or something like that. But if we are equal branches, why do we have the power to impeach and convict the president, and he doesn't have the power to impeach and convict us? And I just wish that my Republican colleagues would be acting like members of Congress, the Article 1 branch, rather than party loyalists and sycophants and subordinates. So that's just the beginning of it. You know, there's an absolute violation of free speech that's taking place when they fire people because of their presumed political affiliation. They're firing federal prosecutors now and targeting FBI agents simply because they did their jobs, because they worked on the January 6th prosecution. But that's now a thought crime to have been involved in prosecuting the worst mass offense against the police in Washington, D.C., the worst mass offense against our democracy in an attempt to overthrow a presidential election that we've ever seen. And yet now they want to try to rewrite the history of that event and criminalize the prosecutors and the FBI agents and the police who participated in going after the Proud Boys, the Oath Keepers, the violent insurrectionists, all of whom have been pardoned by Donald Trump in his first opening salvo against our constitutional order when he got in.
This question will be shorter. Do you agree that what we are experiencing is currently a coup?
Well, a coup would be defined as a seizure of state power by private actors, by taking control of the central channels of social power, and that would include, presumably, government financial payments to the people, Social Security, Medicare, federal salary payments. It would include control over the communications systems. It would include control over large parts of the military, and certainly the data and the information of the public. But I would say if you were to be strictly political scientific about it, it most closely approximates what they tried to do back in January 6th, 2021, which is called a self-coup. A self-coup is when you have a president who's in office who fears electoral defeat and then seizes control over the electoral system, which was the attempted coup that Donald Trump engaged in when he tried to get his vice president to participate in a whole sequence of events nullifying the election of Joe Biden by more than 7 million votes, 306 to 232 in the Electoral College. This is a self-coup because it's an inside maneuver by an incumbent administration against the constitutional architecture, which requires that the federal workforce work under federal law for the federal programs and priorities that have been set by bipartisan agenda in Congress. And so essentially, it's a coup of the executive branch against the legislative branch, also giving the finger to the judicial branch. But fortunately, up until this point, the courts have been standing up. A bunch of federal judges, including Republican nominated judges, are saying they're not taking it, and they have countermanded Trump's attempt by executive order to nullify and obliterate birthright citizenship in America, which is embodied in the first sentence of the 14th Amendment. It says everybody who is born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof shall be a citizen of the United States and a citizen of their state. And Trump basically tried to take millions of citizens and turn them into non-citizens, undocumented illegals, and that has been shut down, just like the illegal spending freeze, a complete violation of our spending power under Article 1, that was shut down. Even Elon Musk's Godfather offer, this fork in the road letter they sent to all federal employees, more than 2 million federal employees got them. In fact, there's some federal judges who came out yesterday saying they got these letters too. They don't even work for the executive branch of government. And Elon Musk was telling them they could take 9 months off at the expense of the American taxpayer and then stop working, drop out of the workforce. So anyway, the courts have been acting like real courts, and that's what we need. The real question is what happens when they get up to the Supreme Court, which has been packed and stacked and gerrymandered by Donald Trump to overturn abortion rights and to give him the right to engage in felony crimes and to be immune for it, which is extraordinary. So a court that would do that could do almost anything. But right now, the federal judges are standing up, and we can be grateful for that.
Well, speaking of federal employees, as a constituent of yours, I can attest that many of your constituents, my neighbors, our neighbors, are suffering due to being pushed out of or encouraged to leave the federal government. 11% of all jobs in the DMV region, the district of Maryland and Virginia, are with the federal government. So what is the real life impact of what Elon Musk is doing to the federal government for those in your districts? And what will be the real life impact for all Americans as he continues to take a wrecking ball to different arms of the US government?
Well, it's a horror story. I mean, the aid, which has been in existence since President Kennedy brought it into existence back in 1961, has been absolutely demolished. They're down to 240 employees. I believe that I've got something like 14 or 15,000 of my constituents who've been living and working abroad in these emergency situations on public health measures, public safety, democracy reinforcing measures against extremist groups and so on. They're all on the way back. They've been sent a stop work order. They've been forced to come back home. They're uprooting their families in the middle of the school year. A lot of their spouses say they work in the military. They either have to try and leave the military or they're left there by themselves without their families. And then they're all coming back here, most of whom don't have a place to live. Many of whom are basically going to be homeless, and they're also jobless now because their source of income has been cut off. But this is going on throughout. I mean, this is federal prosecutors who've been sacked, FBI agents who just went to court yesterday. The Association of FBI Agents sued on behalf of tens of thousands of FBI agents who are essentially being rounded up to see whether or not they worked on the January 6th prosecution. They're absolutely maniacal and obsessed with that. And they basically want to get rid of anybody in the federal government who had anything to do with prosecuting the people who violently assaulted 140 of our cops, brutalizing them, injuring them, hospitalizing them, and so on. So I'm hearing it from all over the place. Yesterday, I talked to a whole bunch of people from NIH, which of course is sponsoring and doing cutting edge research on everything from multiple sclerosis to cystic fibrosis to colon cancer to breast cancer to malignant narcissistic personality disorder. All of that is being investigated and researched out there. And they were subject to the spending freeze. We're freaking out about it. That's been lifted by judicial order. But Elon Musk and his the neo-fascist juvenile night crew was out at NIH trying to get all of their systems from them. They've got the personnel systems, but they want the patient data. They want data about all of the research projects that they've received, all of the grant projects that have been distributed to scientists and doctors around the country. A lot of that violates federal laws. Like the patient privacy laws, the HIPAA laws, but also the Privacy Act itself. And how are we going to keep doctors and scientists if all of their information is suddenly put out to the world like that? So we're dealing with an emergency throughout the government, but this is not really about the devoted, great federal workers we've got. It's about the work that they're doing for the American people and for U.S. foreign policy around the world.
So I'm seeing our very active chat, and I just want to thank everyone. We are going to get to the key question that everybody wants to ask you, which is what can be done? The question, I'll ask it a little bit, a little bit longer than that. We know Congress has authority. how can there be clear action by Congress in this moment? And we have to acknowledge that some Republicans, most of whom are standing idly by, but some have even acknowledged, like Tom Tillis of North Carolina, that what is happening is running afoul of the Constitution, but they are not doing anything. So what hope is there for Congress to serve as a check on Donald Trump? And how can we hold Congress accountable for its inaction if it fails to act?
All right, so we're going to fight this in Congress. Those people who have the fight in them and understand what's taking place. We're going to fight it in subcommittees and committees. We're going to fight it on the floor. In the House, the Republicans have only a 2 representative advantage. If we can pull over 1 or 2 members, we can stop a lot of the legislative stuff that's going on. We already stopped them from lifting the debt limit in order to pass an outrageous echo tax cut of what they did in Trump's first administration. But we need to be pulling these Republicans over to try to defend the civil service laws, to defend the freedom of speech, and so on. On the Senate side, I think that our colleagues have been inspired by a lot of the popular protests around the country, and they just had a 30-hour attempt to stop Russell Vought from becoming OMB director. Unfortunately, it didn't work. But, no good act is wasted in this process. We've got to give other people hope by the actions we take. And sometimes we'll win and sometimes we'll lose. We're winning in court right now. So that's the second thing. We're going to fight in Congress and win whenever we can with the filibuster and any other means available to us. Then we have to fight in the courts. And again, we've seen tremendous progress already in stopping some of the key initiatives that Trump and Elon Musk want. Again, I'm not in the false hope business. We know that they're headed up to the Supreme Court on a number of these things, but it's very important that the whole country be unified behind what these federal judges are doing. And then we've got to fight them in the streets. And that might be the most important thing in order to give everybody courage to stand up against what's taking place. So I've been to a march or a protest every day this week. My new slogan is "A rally a day keeps the fascists away." So we got to go to the Department of Education. We've got to go to NOAA. We got to go to the NIH, just like we started it all at AID. And I want to salute the workers there for speaking up. And the federal workers who are under attack can all be whistleblowers and can get in touch with a member of Congress or the press to explain precisely what's going on. That's how one of Elon Musk's, intern subordinates got fired yesterday because it turned out that he had an X site in which he said some of these things. Just for the record, I was racist before it was cool. You could not pay me to marry outside of my ethnicity. 99% of there's one. Let's see. He said. Normalize Indian hate, he said. And I would not mind at all if Gaza and Israel were both wiped off the face of the earth. There you go. Somebody who hates Palestinians and hates Israelis too. Your tax dollars at work. This is a young man, apparently, who is in that fascist night crew where they're hitting federal agencies and trying to gobble up everybody's privacy information, everybody's data, the personnel records, and so on. And the Vice President of the United States just tweeted out that this guy, this racist, self-avowed racist, who said that Israel and Gaza both could disappear from the face of the earth for all he cares, that guy should be reinstated. Vice President Vance just tweeted in support of him saying, don't ruin the kid's life. It's all about that kid. I told him to keep that in mind next time gun safety legislation is coming up. That sentiment, don't ruin the kid's life. Think about all the children's lives that have been extinguished because of their outrageous position against gun safety laws. Legislation supported, by the way, by more than 80 or 90% of the people. 90% of the people support a universal violent criminal background check to close the loopholes in Brady. But I digress.
We are getting a lot of questions from people who want to know what is the most effective and concrete steps that we can take to fight back, to express our deep concern over what is happening. And we have heard that, for example, in the Senate, the calls are up by 40 times the normal number. As a member of Congress, are members hearing the outrage of the American people?
Well, look, the vast majority of Democratic members of Congress are doing the right thing and have gotten their fight back. So I want to thank everybody out there for helping make that happen. If there are Democrats who've not gotten their fight back yet, get to them. But really, we need to activate people in Republican districts to call to say, this is not what I voted for. What I voted for was bringing down the price of eggs. Eggs have never been more expensive in the history of the United States than they are today. What are they doing about the bird flu, which will drive up the price of eggs? They are dismantling public health agencies. They had an order to NIH not to communicate with the public, which fortunately was withdrawn after public protests. But these are people who seem to have no interest in the federal government unless it's a money-making opportunity for them and their friends, which is why they've laid off the military-industrial complex, because there are not $40 billion in foreign aid to be made, but $800 or $900 billion to be made. That's where the real action is. But of course, their DOGE committee is not going to do anything about that. So I'd say you've got to activate your family, your friends in the Republican districts. And if you're not sure where they are on it, then make it your business to call up and talk to your family and friends about what's going on. Remember, we've got separate media systems in America. There are a lot of people who don't understand this is happening. If all you did is watch Fox News, you would just think that Donald Trump is just racking up one victory after another. So part of what we've got to do is to break down these huge barriers and obstacles to information and real education in the country. They are trying to turn half of the country into robotic cult members.
We're getting a lot of questions, though, about this point of engaging with members of Congress. This is what JDCA has been encouraging everyone to do, and we can post an easy way for you to email and or call your members of Congress, especially in those Republican districts and states. Do members of Congress hear the calls? Does it make a difference?
Oh, I mean, I'll tell you a story about that from the first Trump administration. And I was elected to Congress for the first time the same night Trump was elected to Congress. So it was not quite what I was expecting. But I was sort of amazed at how many of my Democratic colleagues were saying to me, I was meeting them the first time, well, we're really going to, have to try to meet him halfway on the Muslim ban. And we're really going to have to, not take such a extreme position on gun safety and so on. And then the Great Women's March happened on January 21st. We had been sworn in on January 3rd. And the difference was palpable. The minute I got back, everybody was saying, we got to fight, we got to hang tough, we got to be strong. So it makes a huge difference. But of course, in this scenario where Democrats are a minority, a narrow minority, but still a minority in the House and a minority in the Senate, and we don't have the White House and we're behind in the Supreme Court, it's not enough. You can energize and vitalize every elected Democrat in the country, and we must do that, and that should not be difficult. If it is difficult, we've got the wrong Democrats in there. But the real issue is whether we can begin to put pressure on Republicans, especially on the House side, so they understand it's their political future at stake. We've got to be organizing in all of those districts. And sometimes, I confess, it's hard because those sometimes will be the most moderate Republicans you can find in the districts where they're winning by 1% or by, 700 or 800 votes, like the Republican rep from Iowa who beat Christina Bohannon, who we're trying to get back to run again, like so many of these other candidates. But you've got to say to those Republicans, look, if you don't really agree with all the MAGA madness and the derangement that's been unleashed in our country, you shouldn't be in the Republican Party, because what you're doing is you're just putting Mike Johnson in power. and the Mitch McConnells of the world and Donald Trump and Elon Musk. So even if they're a nice person, you've got to say, you're in the wrong party and we're going to take this seat back. And here's why. And so they've got to be looking over their shoulder every day in terms of the politics of every vote. And then we've got to stand up for the people who are under the gun. We haven't even talked about immigration yet. We haven't talked about the refugees. The refugees were cut off on day one. And these are people who have a well-founded fear of political and religious persecution if they're sent back to their home countries. And they have cut off not only refugee admissions, they've cut off the very minimal stipend that exists for people who have passed through our rigorous vetting mechanism and are in the country. And they've been given in the past these stipends for rent and for food. So they're not homeless, and so their children aren't starving while they're here for a 3-month period. And they cut that off. And Secretary of State Marco Rubio said that's foreign aid. It's not foreign aid when it goes to people who are refugees in our country, who can actually strengthen our communities. There are small towns and big cities and counties all over America who would love to have that support of refugees who arrive desperate from the political circumstances they're fleeing, but many of whom are doctors and scientists and researchers and bricklayers and people who can do stuff. And we should be embracing them. That's America. Let's not forget, this is America, right? What people love about America is that we've got a heart. We've got a heart so big that a young man who was born in South Africa, who went to Canada, was able to come here to go to school, named Elon Musk. And then he dropped out of school and started working illegally as an undocumented worker. And everybody knows it. And everybody understands that that's reality, but he's still not being deported from the country. But that doesn't give him a right to violate the laws of the country and to be violating the Constitution. I understand I probably just made an argument for deporting undocumented workers by telling everybody that story. But in any event, we need a comprehensive immigration plan to bring everybody together, and we can deal with the dreamers and the people here under TPS, the categories of workers we need badly in our country, like people in healthcare to come work here, people in construction, people in agriculture, as well as figuring out some plan on a bipartisan basis to deal with people who are undocumented workers like Elon Musk was.
You had mentioned the very, very narrow majority, just 3 seats in the House that Republicans currently have. There are some big votes that are coming, including those related to the budget. Could you speak about what we can expect to see in terms of the budget? There's talk now of Democrats potentially refusing to go along with continuing to fund the budget, which might lead to a shutdown. What can we expect in the next few months in terms of the budget?
Well, look, we are and we have always been the party of reason and common sense. If it had not been for Democrats, the government would have shut down repeatedly in the 118th Congress. In the last Congress, Mike Johnson came to us numerous times begging for our support, and we did the right thing to keep the government going. But we're not suckers, and we're not going to lift the debt ceiling so they can give another $1 trillion tax cut to the wealthiest corporations in America while they dismantle the essential legislative functions we've already paid for, while they impound billions of dollars that we have already appropriated for other public purposes. So we need to sit down and restore the rule of law in the country with them. And then, as always, we will do the right thing for America. But Democrats are not going to get picked off one by one. We've got unity, we've got cohesion, we've got focus with our great leader, Hakeem Jeffries. And we're going to stick together through this process to make progress for America. That's what we're doing here.
So is that vote likely the best lever that Democrats in the House have to stop what's happening?
Well, it will definitely be a lever, Haley. It's not our only one. We've got multiple levers of action here. And that's the great thing about living in a constitutional democracy. I mean, when we're in control and we've got the gavels, they use it in order to press absurd agendas, like when that Republican senator basically held up all appointments to the military until they agreed not to allow women in the military to cross state lines for abortion or to be transported to get an abortion, right? And he shut it down. Well, we can flip every mechanism over that's been used against us to actually get the people's business done to stop them from trampling the Constitution. And that's what we're going to do on the House side and on the Senate side. And we're going to use the Constitution of the United States as a shield, however we can, in the courts, despite the fact that the Supreme Court, as everybody knows, is now riddled with, Federalist Society hacks and people who are willing to do Donald Trump's bidding at every turn.
And I'm trying to synthesize the rapid fire questions that are coming in the chat, but I think it's important. You mentioned Hakeem Jeffries. We have a question here about legislation to stop DOJ from accessing our information, our financial information, now that Elon Musk and his team appear to have the federal government's checkbook at the Treasury. Could you speak to the actions that Democrats have already taken? I believe legislation was introduced on this issue this week.
Yes, there's no shortage of legislation. There are bills to abolish DOJ. There's bills to say that that Elon Musk would have to pay for any damages in any lawsuits that are successful against the government, so the taxpayers don't end up paying in the lawsuits to protect the money of taxpayers against Elon Musk. You name it, we've got it all out there. The problem, of course, is that right now we have no Republicans supporting us on anything, except secretly behind closed doors. But I remember very clearly in Trump 1, when we first started talking to Liz Cheney, who's somebody, I had gotten to know, fortunately, in other circumstances. I remember when we first started talking to Adam Kinzinger, whose office was across the hall from mine and whose locker in the gym was next to mine, and I wouldn't, leave him alone. And those are very smart people with open minds, and we got to find those smart people with open minds, including the new freshman Republicans who've just arrived, who may feel like a lot of Republicans in America, this is not what I voted for. This is not what I came here to do. And remember, Elon Musk antagonizes a lot of Republicans too. Steve Bannon has called him a truly evil person. Steve Bannon and Laura Loomer have been tweeting as much as they can against Musk. Of course, they've been shadow banned on Twitter, on X, ever since they started doing that. But there are a lot of MAGA people who say, this is not what we voted for. And we did not vote for a techno dictator who essentially wants to extinguish the Constitution of the United States.
We have a lot of questions following up on your encouraging us to march. Someone saying that we fear that potentially Trump will have his militia out there. Of course, he just pardoned, commuted the sentences of, and released from jail over 1,500 people. Are there protections if we peacefully march? And we have another question related, that if you live in a blue state and you're taking action, encouraging your member of Congress, your Democratic members of Congress to hold Trump accountable, can we also be reaching out to Republicans?
Great. So first on the March question, which is a critical question, because a lot of people have said it's time to do another march, the size and the scope and the magnitude and the velocity of the Women's March. It's important to analyze it because I think there has been a lot of fear that with more than 1,500 of his extremist shock troops pardoned, that there would be a built-in private militia that Trump could unleash on a huge march like that, in their counterfeit pursuit of Antifa. We saw that game that they played on January 6, 2021, and then to engage in street clashes, which would give Trump a pretext basically to impose martial law, which is something that he may be itching to do. So in that theory, we should hold off on a mass march. On the other hand, the proliferation of pop-up rallies all over America in city and town halls, in the state capitals, like we've been doing in the Washington area at the Department of Education, the Department of Labor, Aid, and so on. That's amazing. That's something that they have a hard time keeping track of. And that demonstrates the strength and the power and the passion of popular opposition to the Musk takeover of the federal government. But I'm not saying no permanently to that, because it may come to a point where we have to say we've got to bring 5 or 10 million people to Washington, and then we've got to work with the mayor of Washington, and we've got to defend their home rule, because there are Republicans who want to revoke home rule in the District of Columbia too as part of this coup. But work with the mayor of DC to have real police security and protection, and understand that the police, the Capitol Police, the Metropolitan Police, and DC Police all over the country are on our side against Donald Trump, who doesn't back the blue, he backs the coup at every turn. And Mike Johnson has had a plaque. I mean, this is almost a pathetically small thing, but Congress voted to put up a plaque in honor of police officers like Officer Brian Sicknick, whose life was lost after he was attacked on January 6th by the mob. He's buried at Arlington National Cemetery. That plaque has not been put up. And so we're demanding that the Republicans put up the plaque in honor of the cops who defended us so valiantly on January 6, 2021.
There's a lot of questions about what will it take to get the Republicans, even a handful of them, to take some meaningful action. I mean, I'm interested, you said something about behind closed doors, indicating they know it's wrong. Some of them have even publicly said so. What do you think it will take to get them to do something?
Well, I think that there will be an accelerating split between pro-Elon Musk forces in the Republican Party and anti-Elon Musk forces in the party. And when that goes public, and everybody should be doing everything in their power to talk about it, when that goes public, then at that point, Republicans will begin to come over and say they don't want the continuing destruction of our Constitution. Right now, a lot of Republicans think that Elon Musk and Donald Trump are together like this, and maybe they are going to continue to be that. And if so, then we need to get the pro-Constitution Republicans who are anti-Musk Republicans to break away from them. And, you know, we saw it with Liz Cheney and Adam Kinzinger and Mitt Romney, but it begins at the local level, at the family level, at the community level, for people to say, that's not what this is about. But you can find lots of right-wing people, lots of conservative people who will say, when you read what the Silicon Valley billionaires are talking about, creating a corporate monarchism in America, feudalism for everybody else, but basically corporate monarchism. One of their big heroes, this guy Yarvin, says, yes, I am for a monarch, for a king. That's just what a CEO is. And just like we have CEOs and corporations who are kings within their corporate domain, the government should be like a corporation, and we need a king there. And it shouldn't be lost on anybody that the reason they use the language of a king or a monarch or a CEO and not president is because Elon Musk was born in South Africa. He can't be a president under our Constitution, but they would very much like to propel him to the position of being a king or, you know, some kind of techno monarch over everybody.
Okay, our last question, and it'll actually be two. I'm trying to synthesize as many as I can here, but I think that what people really want to hear from you is what we can be doing, specific steps, our marching orders, if you will, to make a difference in this moment. And then, of course, we'd like to hear from you. What gives you hope
All right.
What
Well,
the
look,
light at the end of this tunnel?
I mean, everybody has got to take care of themselves and their families, especially. And that's very clear from our experience last time. And it's very clear now. It's an enormously stressful time for people. And we've got to make sure people are taking care of themselves, not to the exclusion of politics, but to the accompaniment of politics. Look, we've got to be very nimble. We've got to be very creative, and we've got to be very versatile in dealing with this, because we are facing a shutout at the level of federal government. And so we're close, like in the House, and we're going to fight our way back. We've got to win in 2026. And while we're playing defense on all of these things against Musk and Trump, we've got to be fighting on offense to go out there and win in 2026. And everybody needs to be part of that. Please find out about my Democracy Summer Project, where we're organizing high school and college and apprentice-aged young people across the country to be engaged in this struggle. So we're going to have to fight at the state and local level a lot, and the state governors and attorneys general have already played a really positive role. So make sure you're backing them up where we've got the power there, and when we don't have the power there, we've got to be organizing to get the power there. So there's not one thing that should be done. There are many things that can be done, but we're doing this together. What gives me hope? You know, when I was growing up, Halie, my dad used to say to us, when everything looks hopeless, you're the hope. And so each of us is the hope. We are the hope. And no matter how bad you might feel, I can guarantee you that other people are feeling worse. Your job is to go and cheer them up and help them out. Those of us who are not facing immediate deportation from the country, or we're not about to lose their job because they're a public health worker for the government, all those people are in a much more desperate situation, lower down the Maslow's hierarchy of need than most people on this call. And so we got to reach out and help them. So that's our job. Solidarity will be the watchword. Solidarity will get us through, and we are going to get through this nightmare, and we will be much stronger having done it than we were even before not having done it. I'll leave you with the words of the great Tom Paine, who arrived in America in 1774, 2 years before the American Revolution. He fell in love with the promise of this country. He said, if America lives up to its spirit and its values, it will become an asylum to humanity, he said. Not an insane asylum, mind you, but a place of refuge for people seeking freedom from religious and political persecution from all over the world. And in 1776, when people took up the call of common sense, his great polemical tract, the American Revolution began. And he wrote another pamphlet, and I just want to quote a little phrase from the pamphlet for you, called The American Crisis, because people didn't know which way it was going to go. The country appeared to be split right down the middle. And half of the people were saying, you can't get rid of kings and queens and monarchs and emperors and the fusion of church and state and all that. And half the people were saying, no, let us gamble on democratic freedom on behalf of the rights of the people, and self-government as the principle for how civilized people proceed in history. And so anyway, he wrote this pamphlet called The American Crisis, and I'm going to update the language pursuant to instructions from Nancy Pelosi, who said Tom Paine was a feminist, and that he was, and he wouldn't mind. He was fighting for women's suffrage back in the 18th century. But anyway, he said, these are the times that try men and women's souls. The summer soldier and the sunshine patriot will shrink at this moment from the service of their cause and their country, but everyone that stands with us now will win the love and the favor and the affection of every man and every woman for all time. Tyranny, like hell, is not easily conquered, but we have this saving consolation. The more difficult the struggle, the more glorious in the end will be our victory. So let's make that struggle, let's make that victory ours. Thank you, JDCA, for everything you do. You're a critical force in this fight, and I'm honored to be with you shoulder to shoulder.
Thank you so much, Congressman. We are grateful for your commitment to being a Jewish defender of democracy and every day representing our values in Congress. Thank you for your leadership, and we are with you in this fight. Thank you.
Well, I appreciate it. And if you would send me everybody's comments and questions, because I wasn't able to see them while I was.
They're coming fast and furious. I tried to.
Well, send them to me because I want to reply to some people, okay? Thank you,
Okay.
everybody. Thanks up.
Thank you. And we'll now hear in closing from our Chief Program Officer, Bobby Saferstein, to tell us all what we can do. Bobby, over to you.
Thank you, Haley, and thank you to the congressman and to the more than 2,000 of you who signed up to join us today, and for everything each of you are doing to defend our democracy. Since the election, JDCA community members have sent more than 14,000 letters to their members of Congress and have lent their names to our petitions nearly 2,000 times. And since January 20th, members of Congress are reporting a nearly 400% increase in calls to their offices opposing the dangerous, destructive, and unlawful actions being taken. For that, we say thank you. You are making a difference. But there's more we can do. Here's how. 1, join JDCA in continuing to urge your congressional representatives to oppose this power grab by clicking on the link in the chat. 2, consider joining one of JDCA's regional networks to connect with fellow Jewish Democrats near you who are fighting to uphold the values of equity, equality, freedom, and democracy that we all stand for. Please click on the link in the chat. And 3, if you're not yet a JDCA member, please consider becoming one or increasing your membership level to support our work. JDCA members gain access to exclusive benefits such as members-only programs where we dive deeper into the most important issues of today with leading experts in a more intimate setting. Last week, we heard from Democracy Docket's Mark Elias, and our next conversation will focus on the new media landscape with Jen Rubin and Norm Eisen, co-founders of The Contrarian. You don't want to miss it. So become a member by clicking on the link in the chat. As we enter Shabbat and what will surely be another weekend filled with news out of Washington, it's important to remember that this is a marathon, not a sprint. Please make sure to take time for yourself. Check in with friends and family and do something that makes you happy. As the Talmud tells us, don't delay joy. For joy is at once both an act of resistance and a Jewish value. And finally, as Representative Raskin reminded us, when everything looks hopeless, you are the hope. Thank you for joining JDCA. Shabbat Shalom, and see you soon.